Welcome to the Zarlequan Podcast. I'm your host, Brittani Starr. Today, we have a truly multifaceted guest joining us, someone whose creative journey spans the realms of writing, art, music, and academia. He is a British writer, artist, musician, and academic specializing in cultural theory and justice reform. With numerous publications, awards, and even a TED Talk under his belt, he is a true Renaissance soul. Please join us in welcoming Sean B.W. Parker to the show.
Conversations with Indie Authors.
So welcome to the show, Sean B.W. Parker.
Hi, Brittany. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Can you share with our audience what inspired you to become a writer, an artist, a musician, and an academic?
Right. Well, it all came not all at the same time at different parts of my life. I've known since I was about 14 that I'm a creative, and I probably around discovering the music of Prince and The Cure and David Bowie and things like that in the late 80s, and kind of getting into bands at that time in the grunge era as a singer-songwriter, and then going off to university a bit later to do an art degree, to do fine art, and all of the different disciplines coming together. Doing the music and the art and the writing. But it was only in the last couple of years that I've also become an academic in the field of justice reform, which is the more serious side of, I guess, the other artistic things that I do. So it's a very short version for you.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up because most of your stuff is kind of fun, like music and writing. And now you're doing some very serious justice projects. Can you talk to us about that?
I guess kind of sort of around the time of the Brexit and the Trump kind of election in the US, and kind of Me Too and things like this, and then Black Lives Matter, all of the culture wars things became very, very engaging, interesting. Some could say toxic. And as a culture writer, which I'd become by then over a couple of books, I got rather sucked into that. And then and I was running an arts venue where there are certain allegations and all this kind of thing. All these culture war issues came into my life. So I quite quickly became a bit of an expert on justice reform issues myself. And so here I am 6 years later, and I work quite closely with the University of Bristol on this, and Dr. Michael Norton at Empowering the Innocent. So basically I do a lot of work for False Allegations Watch, which is a site that runs out of University of Bristol, as well as all the other artistic things I do. But I keep trying to do the proper artsy stuff at the same time. There isn't any lessening of intensity of any of it.
Okay. So you lived in Istanbul for 10 years. Can you share about that experience and how it shaped your creativity and your academic life as well?
Yeah. I lived in Istanbul between 2004 and 2014. I was there as a musician, but also and as a teacher as well of kind of cultural studies and English literature. So I did a bunch of. I was teaching at English schools in Istanbul. Not getting over my stammer, but I'm a stammerer, and it comes now and again. A person who stammers, they say these days. And the last book I wrote, Compelling Speech, is about the stammer, like an autobiography of the stammer. So teaching English was one of the best therapies for this, or the best ways of integrating it into better speech, not better, more fluent speech in life, in order kind of sort of separating out the sounds, understanding language from a different ear, that kind of thing really helped with the production of English, basically. So it was wonderful for that over the 10 years. When it came to making music, I was living in the middle of a big city. So as a Englishman in my 30s, living in the middle of a cosmopolitan city like Istanbul, lots more options in recording studios, in record companies, and the online boom was just starting. So all of my albums, 8 albums, 6 studio albums and a couple of compilations were made in that way, put out over Believe Digital and things like that. And then Amazon came. So this internet revolution that the music industry's gone through, I was there at the start of that with making these records. So Istanbul was great for those productive things. And culturally, of course, I love Turkish people. I had loads of Turkish friends, loads of Turkish students. It was just a very, very enriching time. And yeah, I had a great time as a person will do at that time of their life out there.
Can you tell what style of music do you do, and where can we find it online?
Yeah, it's on the whole, it's described as art rock. The comparisons have been made to Roxy Music, Talking Heads, some Babel and Sebastian, Velvet Underground. These people have all been quoted. And the last single of ours, Starting a Fight, which is a live single recorded 10 years ago in Istanbul, there was a reviewer who compared that to the B-52s. So all these art rock influences are very much in there. I'm very proud of those references. I'm not afraid of them at all. It's Scorpio Rising was the name of my band out there, and the Sean Parker band too, because they're all, I write all the songs. So we had both of those titles, and they're out on all the normal places: Amazon, Spotify. If you go to Spotify, Sean B.W. Parker, or YouTube, all the music will come up as it do, and you can stream away to your heart's content.
Awesome. You have given various talks at a lot of different universities, and you've appeared on multiple platforms. What are some key topics or messages that you enjoy discussing?
The first one was a TED talk. The first big one was a TED talk out in Istanbul. I was asked in the role as culture writer there to, would you like to do a TED talk? I said, I'd love to. And so I thought about it. What can you sort of stand by that you really know about? Because, you know, TED Talk's a big deal and all this. So I thought the stammering, I know about that. And I got some things I can talk about for 15 minutes. And kind of creativity. These are two things that I am and I know. So I put them together and I wrote a talk called Stammering and Creativity. And for a good few years, it was the most popular subject on the subject of stammering online. You know, 40,000 views and whatnot. All those, that kind of thing that TED attracts, which is kind of quality thinking online. So that was a nice sort of introduction to the world of that. And it's hard to sort of go up from a TED talk. So you kind of go out. And I did a talk at Istanbul University at the time, Turkey, the body language, Turkey and body language, and the UK. Sort of the differences between how people communicate physically in those two cultures. And then and I would give that stammering creativity talk at various places here in Britain when I came back. And then since 2017, some talks about justice reform issues. I've gone to miscarriages of justice conferences and things like that just over the last year or so.
So how does your artistic endeavors mix with the justice? And tell us about your book that you have out on it. What is it called?
Kind of compelling speech. The Stammering Enigma is the last one.
Okay. You know, that's funny. I have a friend that had stammering problems growing up, and the way he cured it was he became a manager and had to give public talks all the time. And through that, it just went away.
Well, absolutely. There's a lot to be said for practice speaking, and that's about your character and getting it out there. And also you pick up some tricks, like, you know, just talking to you now, I've employed a bunch of tricks that you might notice and might not, and that's how we get by through it. Because it used to be a really bad block before the teaching. I wouldn't be able to do this or get things out properly, like my own name for years. But now there are certain ways you can find the way through it, and that's yeah, it's not so much a cure, but it's because there's nothing to cure. It's more of a strategy of handling how you're going to handle your speaking life, basically. Yeah, which is talked about in compelling speech there. On it's like a short book. It's only 100 pages or so, and it's, as I say, it's an autobiography of stammering itself, how it's sort of seen in culture, the difference between being a stammerer and being considered disabled is quite an interesting subject to how you want to be treated in society, because it disables, but are you disabled? You know, lots of people, stammerers or not, will have different thoughts about that. So I go into that, and I treat the whole thing with a big dose of humor, because I'm a 48-year-old Englishman, so you got to get. I'm going to get some humor in there, because I have a humorous approach to life. So despite all the things I deal with, So that's kind of included in there too, and it's a fantastically well written book. What can I tell your audience? They need to buy it. It's wonderful. But apart from that, it's just a bit of it's a short riot basically. You had another question, didn't you? About
Where is that book available? Where can we find it?
Oh yes, of course it's on old Amazon under Jeff Bezos's bookshelf, and if they go to Sean B.W. Parker on Amazon, they'll see my 8 books on there, and that's the newest one and the most reviewed and things like that. It's good because it's like it's a sequential book. It tells a story as such of a stammer in my life, but I don't go on about my own life very much. It's more about how the stammer has affected it and how then the stammer becomes less in life and other issues behind that, like having emotional problems attached to it. All those things are in there, but as I say, it's done in a oblique kind of way.
So how many books do you have, and are they all about stammering?
Oh no, yes, I got 7 written by me, and then 4 contributed to, which is usually poetry. I'm a poet as well, so there's a bunch of poems that I've written that are contributed to other books, which are there on a couple of them are there on the Amazon. The other ones are usually about cultural theory. The first one I published was Salt in the Milk to 10 years in Istanbul. So just after getting back from there, I wrote this book as a cathartic coming home experience, because that's a bumpy journey. And so I put a lot of experiences into this little compendium of kind of the music reviews and scripts and things like that, and some vignettes. So it's a bit of a mess, but it's a very thick mess, Salt in the Milk, and it was my most successful for a couple of years. And then there's a bunch of other books pretty much about the cultural theory of that year. I'd look at the news reports and how the culture felt, and then I put it through my own perspective of that. So I don't ever just take a news report on its face like any intelligent person doesn't anymore. I would like think about that news, what it means, and then put it into an artistic way. I bring artisticness into everything I do. Otherwise, it has not much value to me,
Absolutely. I was actually my next question was, how do you balance that? Because you do very serious topics, but you do it with humor and art. So how do you balance all of that together?
Um, I see what can be included in one thing, and then I talk about or handle that one thing. Even if I'm kind of writing about justice reform, like the release of Mr. Andy Malkinson after 17 years inside for a rape he didn't commit in 2003. He was just released a couple of years ago and exonerated a couple of months ago because there was no evidence, this kind of thing. I can even inject some sort of color and humor into that kind of article because he's a colorful, humorous person himself. So on the False Allegations Watch, you can find, not everything has to be doomy serious. You can always inject something in there to bring humanity. So after learning everything I have about justice reform, I try to inject that into it, but without not kind of mocking it at all, just bringing the humanity basically. And you can do that in every field. And I keep all these fields going because I love them all. And I still have things to do with music, not so much as I once did. I do a bit more curation of that now. But with the art, for example, that's one of mine. It's like you can bring yourself and your color into even the very serious issues. And it doesn't all have to be an emotional sort of kind of wreckage operation. It can just be a celebration.
So what advice would you give to aspiring artists and writers?
Well, speak in your own voice, he says with his improved stammer. Lots of people are, because of culture war issues and the digital world, are very concerned about their digital fingerprint. And I would tell them to not be concerned about that. Stand by what you write, however appalling it is, or however gross other people find it, just stand by it. And if you have to argue your point, argue your point. Don't do ad hominem. Don't attack people when they attack you. Just think about what they've said and handle it in a mature way, because they're usually coming from a place of their own bias. So once you've worked that out, it's easier to handle criticism, because that's what people are most afraid of. But if you stand by what you've written and you mean it, and don't kind of edit too much. Everyone's far too self-editing. You should always write everything out, however disgusting it feels, come back to it the next day or the next week, and then do editing if you then think it's appropriate. Don't do it as you go, because we're far too concerned with trying to clean up our thoughts. Keep the thoughts dirty as long as you can, in order that you keep the humanity in as long as possible. And then if another editor has to get rid of it, they'll do it. It's not your job to do that for legality, you know. Take risks is what I'm saying, I think.
That's good advice. You have an award-winning play called The Wolfstadt Wire. What was the inspiration behind that? And can you give us little highlights about it?
Right, Wolfstadt Wire, yes, that won a Kukosler Arts Platinum Award in 2020. It is a it's a short play of a couple of characters. The man Ant Wolfstadt is a prisoner, an elderly-ish prisoner who used to be an actor back in the day, back in the like aristocratic 20th century, having difficulty as he dies of cancer, getting used to the new progressive 21st century. And his sort of foil is another prisoner inside who's much younger than him, who's hearing all his old stories and trying to understand this old man. So it's like a culture war vignette, the two of these talking in a sort of Samuel Beckett style, to be honest, way. And there's a love interest there who happens to be a prison facilitator, counselor, who gets involved with the younger prisoner. But, you know, we don't find that out till much later. So spoiler. But it's all about language. Everything I do is about the color of language. It's witty and it's dark because the guy's dying of cancer. However, that's barely mentioned. It's more about the journey that they go through in their conversational world together, and how all of their roles. It's not about being in prison anymore. It's about the fact of who they are and how they feel about each other. Is where the if I say any more, I'll give the ending away, won't I? But I can't actually remember it that clearly because it's 4 years ago I wrote it. So it's
Nice. So you are you've mentioned it a few times, the False Allegations Watch. What exactly is that, and how can other people get involved?
False Allegations Watch was started by Dr. Michael Norton of University of Bristol in Empowering the Innocent organization. He's the man that started the Innocence Network UK about 20 years ago, which was a big deal here in terms of bringing innocence projects to universities. So the law students at those unis could work on actual cases. So he got a name for himself by doing this and became the UK's expert on miscarriages of justice, and a bunch of books out on that. I got in touch with him in about 2019 after the issues with the venue I was mentioning earlier. And he understood I was a writer and that I cared about these things quite deeply. So we started to work together. And he said, you should be the editor of this new project, as a different strand of what he was doing with CCRC Watch, which was Criminal Cases Review Commission Watch. He holds that organization to account, which is quite a big deal. But the false allegations that go on in the culture war generation are a big deal too. So we look at how the media and the justice system work together, how they can be corrupted, and and it's become very, very interesting to many people how these things are, and especially in this online world we're in. And I try to dissect it from a cultural analytical standpoint, and then I'll talk to Michael about the legal implications and try to get those into certain specific stories. So we'll go from the famous, from the Russell Brands and the Kevin Spaceys and things like that in there, to the everyday man, which is also a big part of what we cover as well, because that's the street level. So if they go to Google and False Allegations Watch, they'll see the site. There's a Wix site there with Empowering the Innocent too, and it's a part of there, and you can see all our articles on there.
Wonderful. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today?
Just that I've been very delighted to have been invited on, and you've kind of captured the fact that I do all these different strands of things, and I've teased out the fact that I care about them all equally, because I sometimes question myself, do I care about music anymore? I did lots of recording back then, but the fact is I do, and I'm about to re-release an album later this year. So if anybody's interested, just all they know they have to do is go to Google and check me out, Sean B.W. Parker, and they'll see all the various things I've been involved with law and with art and with music and justice reform.
Thank you so much for being here today, Sean B.W. Parker. You can find him online. This brings us to the conclusion of another insightful episode of the Zarlequan Podcast. A huge thank you to our guest, Sean B.W. Parker, for sharing his incredible journey with us today. Be sure to explore his writings, his works, and his music. You can always find his links in the description box below. And always, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with all your friends. I'm your host, Brittani Starr.
Thank you for joining us on this enlightening episode of the Zarlequan Podcast. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter so you never miss a beat.